Welcome back, guys. JimmyJules153 here, back with another episode of Short Circuits. Today we'll be looking at how to implement a minimap into your game. You can see down the bottom left we have our minimap, and this has two dots on it representing the two players. You can track as many things as your thermometer allows, and each thing that's being tracked on the minimap takes up less than 0.5% of gameplay thermo. You can also do things like create a 3D map, like this one here, and you can place objectives down on this map for the player to go and reach. You can see I've got a little yellow dot on this map, and when I reach that yellow dot, the objectives on the map updates. To make that minimap, I've just copied the entire map and shrunk it down really small, then grouped it with the camera. I've then overlaid the logic for the minimap, so the dots look like they're moving around an actual map. Today we'll be taking you through how to put one of these minimaps in your own game. There's a fair bit of math involved in this, so I've done most of the work for you guys, and you can just search for minimap and grab this setup that I've got here. This is the minimap chip, and there's just a couple of things that we need to do to set this up. If you have a square map, there's very little you need to do here, but I will take you through doing this for different size maps. The first thing we'll want to do is tell the minimap where the map actually is. To do that, we need to place these two tags in their correct locations. This first tag here, we need to place in the location of where we want our bottom left corner of the minimap to be. So in this case, because we have a square, the bottom left will be this corner over here. So we just need to move this tag origin so that it lines up with the bottom left corner of the map. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the more accurate you get it, the more accurate your minimap will be. Now that we've got that tag lined up, we can do the top right corner, and we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll align this tag origin with the top right corner of our map. Just like so. And now that we have those two tags in their positions, the minimap will now be at the correct scale. Again, if you have a square map, there's very little you need to do, so we'll just grab out a puppet, and we'll jump into the puppet logic here. And I've got another chip here, just called Put Me on the Puppet. Just drag that directly onto the puppet. And if we hit play now, you can see our dot is in the position that the player is in. And that will immediately start working. Now that's great, but let's say you had more of a rectangle shaped map. We'll go ahead and resize our text box here just so that it has roughly the same dimensions as our map. And I've just changed the shape of the map here just into a rectangle shape. So now we'll make the minimap for this. Once we have our minimap at about the same ratio as our map, and the right size in the corner that we want, we'll need to realign the keyframes that move the dot around the map. This really isn't too hard, so what we need to do is jump into the tracking chip, and on the very right hand side, there's the corner keyframes. We need to reconfigure these keyframes so that the dot is in the top left for this one. So we'll just grab that into record mode, and we'll move the text box dot just into the top left corner there. Doesn't have to be exact. The top right one will move to the top right of the text box. Just like that. The bottom right, and we're just going to continue this for the other two corners. We also need to recenter the dot to the box so that it centers to the right spot when all of the frames are turned off. Easiest way I've found to do this is to make a double copy of the outside text box, and we'll edit one of them and shrink it all the way into the middle, and we'll edit another one and shrink that all the way horizontally. So now we've got an exact center of our text boxes, and we can move that dot, move the default position of the dot into the center of the map. So that will recenter the dot so that it defaults back to the right position. Now one last thing, because we've changed the map size, we need to move these tags so that they're in the right positions for the map. Now I've just expanded this out upwards, so the bottom left corner is still in the correct spot, but the top right corner will just need to move a bit. Just into the corner up there. So that will rescale our map so the dot moves at the correct speed. We can delete these guidelines, and now if we go into play mode again and head towards the top of the map, you can see the dot is moving much slower. That's because we have a much larger map and we have much more ground to cover. You can of course decorate your map however you like, whether that be with text boxes, emojis, or you can also make custom 3D UI elements and group them with the camera. The last thing I'll take you through is adding additional things for the tracking. Let's say we wanted to track another player or maybe an enemy. We'll copy the tracker chip and the player information chip that goes along with it, and we'll duplicate that just underneath the rest. We need to plug in a few wires here. You can copy the ones that are currently plugged in. It's the easiest way, so we need to plug both of these C ports into the bottom two ports down here, just copying this one up the top, and we need to plug both of the A ports into these ports here. So let's make this track an enemy. We'll make an enemy here just by copying this puppet, and we'll make this one red. It's very sunburnt. All we need to do here is just jump into the put me on the player chip, and we need to rename this wireless transmitter. Now that we've got that transmitter, we just need to rename the receiver to look for that same transmitter. So it's looking for the player position true transmitter. Now if we jump into play mode and possess that character, you can see that we're controlling the red dot. And when we switch to the other player, it's tracking it with the green dot. Now I'll just take you guys through how this works. There is a bit of math involved, but if you're interested, stick around and I'll try and explain it the best I can. What these two tags are doing is basically making a box with the map. So you can see here, if we zoom way out, we've basically got a box that is encompassed by these two tags. We're using the coordinates of these tags and doing some calculations to move that dot around. What we needed to do initially was find out how far up and down the player is percentage-wise on the map. So if the player is halfway across the map horizontally, we need to know that they're 50% of the way across the map. To do that, we need to find out whereabouts the player's coordinate is in relation to the map coordinate. So what we're basically doing there is finding a percentage within a range. I had a Google and I found a formula that works for that. And that formula is x minus min divided by max minus min. X in this case is our player position, and the minimum and the maximum are the minimum vertical position and the maximum vertical position of the map. We're getting these two values from the tags. So I've just gone and converted this equation and made it with gadgets. So you can see here we've got the player's vertical position, which is x, minus the minimum coordinate of the map. And then we've got the max minus min. So down here, we've got the maximum map coordinate minus the minimum map coordinate. And we're grabbing both of those values and dividing them. This will tell us whether the player is 20% of the way up the map, for example. Up here I've got the same thing, but it's doing it for the horizontal direction. So this will tell us whether the player is 40% across the map. Now that we've got those percentage values of where the player is on the map, I needed to know whether the player was in the top, bottom, right, or left quadrant of the map. For the horizontal position, I know that when their signal is above 50%, they'll be in the right-hand side of the map, and when the signal is below 50%, they'll be in the left-hand side. I'm converting this positive signal into a positive and a negative signal, so that I can use a splitter and get two outputs from it. If the input signal is above 50%, it'll output a signal from the positive side of the splitter. If the input signal is below 50%, it'll output a signal from the negative side of the splitter. I'm then adding these vertical and horizontal directions together because our keyframes are actually in the corners of the map and not at the top, right, bottom, and left. So we need to blend these signals to get the correct percentages. I'm then sending these blended signals into these microchips here, and I worked out a formula to get the keyframes to blend correctly. I'm then sending this blended signal directly to the keyframes, and that is what moves the dot around the minimap. You can see that as I move around, the keyframes light up at different brightnesses as they activate. You can see that when I'm in the bottom right corner, the bottom right keyframe is fully lit up. As I move back towards the center, or even to the left, the other keyframes are lit up and start to blend their position of the dot and move it to the character's location. You can sort of think of this in a very similar way to the way cell phone triangulation works. So you can imagine that each of these keyframes is a cell tower, and these are represented by the red dots around the corners of the map. And if we're sticking with the cell phone tower analogy, these green numbers would be the amount of signal that the cell phone towers are receiving from the phone. You can see down the bottom left, this keyframe is being sent an 85% signal, which moves the dot further to the left and to the bottom. This one's receiving a 15% signal, and the one up the top's receiving about a 20% signal. So with these three signals, the cell phone towers can figure out where the phone is. Anyway guys, that's just about all for the Minimap tutorial. If you've got any questions at all, definitely leave a comment. I hope to see some Minimaps start popping up in games soon, and I'll see you in the next one.